I'm Wendy Brodie, chef of Art of Food in YourTown. Thank you. My guest today is someone who's very important to me and a wonderful community member for many, many years. My husband, Robert, or Bob Bussinger, as he likes to go by.
Yeah.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me in this.
Oh, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I love it, yeah.
Well, your whole background, since I've known you, 29 years now, and counting, is being a hotelier and creating hospitality. You've been called many things: a hospitality man, style man, mayor of Big Sur at one point in time, even though they didn't have
honorary mayor.
Honorary mayor, yes, yes. And you've had to handle all kinds of crises, like fires in Big Sur, flooding, all kinds of things. So where do you want to start? Where do you want to start? Yeah.
Well, let's see, 29 years ago. No. Oh, God, there's so much to hospitality, restaurants. It's a whole lifestyle completely. And I enjoy it a whole lot. I guess just a real quick start, in the late 60s, I decided that food was drawing me into it somehow. And I talked to some friends, and they talked me into starting a coffee house in Carmel. And I did it. It took a long time to get through the coastal, or the county and the city and all those items to wrestle through. But I got it started, and I loved it. I absolutely worked harder than I ever did in my life, and I loved every minute of it. Little old coffee house in Carmel called Esperanto, and worked with that for 4 years and learned to cook then. I didn't know how to cook when I started.
Well, that's a great story, how you started. Coming from the business world, stockbrokering, insurance, whatever.
So, yeah, my brokerage dealer firm was across the street. So, anyway, I got into the food so much, but all I knew was I could make a tuna sandwich and I could do peanut butter and jelly. I didn't know much. But my almost happenstance was that I was one of our customers was leaving after having one of our sandwiches, and she said, "You ought to have spaghetti." I said, "Well, I don't know how to cook." And she said, I'll show you." Next day, she shows up, pots, pans, spaghetti, all the stuff, and showed me how she made her spaghetti. And then when I put it on the menu in a few days, I called it her name was like Victoria or Vicky. Vicky's Spaghetti was on my menu. And then it happened with chili, and I ended up with, this was a guy that made the chili. And so I called it, I remember his name now, Jerome's Chili, that's like that. So through the first few months of the coffee house, I learned all these dishes, and still to this day. In fact, I even had the Herald wrote up my clam chowder. It was a super clam chowder.
No, I haven't had that one of yours.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I'll have to dig it up here. Right. So, but I just loved it, and I worked hard, as I say, all the way. And then in the years that I learned that, I started investigating. I sold the coffee house after about 4 years, and started exploring what was available for me in this field. No particular training other than what I had from my guests. But happenstance is Ventana Big Sur was being built, and I heard about it, and I wondered what type of situation it was, and if I would learn more than just my little old coffee house in Carmel. And I talked to the manager of the restaurant, and he thought that he could hire me on opening night of the restaurant at Ventana, and I was a waiter. And
no pressure
I know
there.
from from a broker-dealer on the stock exchange to a waiter. And I love that too. I love the waiting. It was, my feeling in waiting was that you have people come in, and they're usually there, almost always there's something good happening to them, a celebration or something is happening. And my thought was that, by golly, everyone that leaves my section is going to be so happy that they were taken care of. And so my purpose was to make them happy. And in that regard, I had a few through the years that were not happy when they came in. In fact, they looked like they were mad at each other with a couple. And I swore I'm still going to, and invariably by the time they left, they were smiling at each other and had a good time. So to me, it's a package. To dine out, or to dine, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to your body and your spirit. And if you're someone you love, like I would do, it's even more special. So, I mean, it's just, I love every aspect of it. And I learn, again, so much more. I did that waiting for a while, but it was so easy to transist. In that case, the general manager in charge of the whole place was into drugs. He slipped into drugs and was not performing. And the owner of Ventana had admired my work because I was always joking and kidding with him and having a good time. So he wanted to know if I had learned enough to be a food and beverage director. And I didn't know particularly what that was, but it sounded damn good to me. So I became food and beverage director to Ventana Resort. And I learned, again, so much more. And I learned a secret about management that I hadn't known before. And that was trust your employees to know what they're doing if they've been in the business and trained.
That's so smart.
Oh, it was even better because I didn't know anything about a group like a wedding. But I had a couple waiters that had worked for many years in restaurants around, and they had handled those. So rather than show that I didn't know, I would talk to one of them, and I'd say, okay, we got this group coming, and there's like 45 people or 100 people, and I said, now tell me how you want to set this and arrange it. So they'd tell me, and I'd say, good, let's do it. So each time I learned more and more from them how to do it, and they thought I was such a good guy for producing this wonderful event. So it's
win-win.
Yeah.
And then with that, you had a little stint away as food and beverage at Pebble Beach.
Oh, that was a funny one. Should I tell my story?
I think you should tell your story. That's a great one. And if Tom Oliver's watching, I think he'd love it.
Yeah, I knew that Pebble Beach was looking for some top staff. And here I had just learned some good things at Ventana, so I thought, well, hell, I can do that. And Pebble Beach sounded pretty nice, and it wasn't much of a drive from Carmel to Pebble. So I called and made an appointment with Tom Oliver, who was the manager at the time before he became president. And so I met with him and came in his office at Pebble and knocked on the door and introduced myself and sat down. And we talked for a bit about experience and so forth. And one thing was, he says, we never hire anybody with facial hair. Never in the history have we had a employee facial hair. I said, well, that's me. This is what I do. It's been there for a lot of years. And he said, well, God, what happens if you shave and you're ugly? And he says, you got any pictures? Literally, he wanted to see pictures of me before I had a beard to make sure I wasn't ugly. And so we went over that for a little bit, and then I kept talking about it more. And then I thought this might be a good time to stick an extra plug in. The guy that had hired me at Ventana, was pretty good, and I thought this would be good. So I said, and by the way, Alan, so and so says to say that this was a good place to be, and he pulled back and he said, he said we could have talked all day, and you hired that son of a bitch, and or you mentioned him, and I thought, oh man, did I blow it? So I didn't say a word. I just pushed my chair back. I got up, walked out the door, closed the door, took about 3 breaths, knocked on the door, opened it. I say, Mr. Oliver, hi, I'm Bob Bussinger. I had this appointment with you. And he looked at me and went back in his chair, damn near fell over laughing so hard. So he finally agreed to hire me, beard and all. So for the first few months I was the food and beverage and also maitre d'. And so every week I would write a note to Tom. I'd say, so-and-so, Mrs., she's been coming for 30 years at Pebble Beach. She loved to stroke my beard. Next week, so-and-so had been here. And he was really commenting on how distinguished I looked. And every week I dropped Tom a note, and finally he said, okay, you keep the hair.
So that probably released a whole new look for Pebble Beach.
It did. They started slowly
Good
appearing.
For you. Good for you.
So I kept it. And then the owner of Ventana had appeared for dinner. He was by himself, and I chatted with him a bit, sat down, talked, and I loved the maitre d' and kind of the in charge of the dining room, and I get to flambe ducks at the table, and I like the showmanship. I'd wear my tuxedo, so I was having fun with that. And he called me the next day and said, "Would you be interested in coming back to Ventana?" And I said, "Well, it depends." He says, "Well, I need that food and beverage position filled, and we got things working a lot better now than our initial stumbling around." So I said, "Sure." And Tom was so gracious. He said, "Don't do it." He says, "They're going bankrupt." And I said, I really want to do it. I want to do it. He said, "Well," and this was so great. He said, "I'll tell you what." He says, "Go ahead, but if it doesn't work for you, you got this job back here."
How super.
And I thought, wow, what can I lose? And so that was the beginning of 20 years in Big Sur with the Ventana. And I was food and beverage director, and the hotel manager and property manager was having trouble with drinks and drugs, and so he got fired, and I became general manager. And then the owner at the time was having a hard time paying his bills. He kind of stashed them. So all at once he was going out, and the Ventana was up for some real major financial problems. And so Transamerica had been the first one to be on the mortgage, first mortgage. And so they were going to buy him out, and they did good. They didn't close him out. They just paid him off what he put in and took over. But they didn't know the hotel business or the restaurant business. And so there I was, and I said, okay, I can hang on here a bit. And they said, well, we'll make you a acting general manager.
Super.
And I said, no, I don't want that. I said, I'm going to run it.
Oh.
I'm general manager, right? And so the vice president was here, and the president, they were down, and they said, well, wait. So they parted, and then about 3 hours later came back and say, okay, you're general manager.
Wonderful.
So I hang in it. And then through the years, I learned again so much. I had people that worked for hotels and restaurants, so I learned the hotel business, which I had not much idea.
It's never gotten out of your system, I know. It's like the long-lost child.
There,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, it's so there.
And you were so good at your own restaurants, and I know we briefly did one together.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
9/11 happened, and all kinds of
That was
things.
that was a super experience in Carmel for how many years? We did that for a few years, and then 9/11 was disastrous to us, but it gave us the opportunity to start a TV show with.
Yes. But what was even more wonderful, I think there must be a culinary gene, because each one of your kids has, throughout the years, been involved in some fashion, besides helping you out at Esperanto. But you've been a great culinary family. And
we did, and my youngest son, my youngest child, Mike, had been cooking, oh boy, since he was about 13, 14 years old, always been in the kitchen, and became a chef, and became a very accomplished chef, and had worked with some great restaurants in San Francisco and Seattle. So yeah, it was always kind of there, sticking with me.
Yes, a wonderful profession. And you've learned over the years, and we've talked about it in entertaining, and just briefly, some of the tips and when you're serving people, or lighting and mood and music, if you could just elaborate on that quickly.
I think most all of that is transferable to your own home. For example, people arriving at your house, your guests, whether it's business or just friends coming over, the first appearances are always vital to the experience of the evening. And of course, the entryway is clean and picked up, and
no cobwebs.
That's the first part. But then there's an entrance, some music, and if you know something about the people that are coming, you can kind of pick maybe jazz or a little piano playing or something very mild, not too loud because conversation is important, but some of the background. So that is important to kind of use that as a meeting. The volume and so forth is always important too. But overall, mannerisms that you learn with treating people and how the food is served and all that, it all translates right to your own home.
And what you've taught me over the years, not only how you treat me and always setting a place for dinner, but you care about things from your core and expand it outward. You always set your own table. We could go on and on. I need another lifetime. Thank you for being a guest.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you for being on YourTown.